When newly released court documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein mentioned Michael Jackson's name, the reaction online was immediate and intense. Headlines spread rapidly, social media erupted, and many people assumed the worst before reading the details. The documents also reference public figures such as former U.S. Presidents Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, magician David Copperfield, and Prince Andrew. Yet despite the frenzy, none of the high-profile individuals named in those particular releases were charged with wrongdoing simply for appearing in the files. Being mentioned in documents connected to Epstein is not the same as being accused or convicted of a crime, but nuance often gets lost once a name starts trending. As Jackson's name circulated again, it revived decades-old controversies surrounding him. At the same time, long-standing claims by former child actor Corey Feldman resurfaced in public discussion. Feldman, who rose to fame in the 1980s through films like The Goonies, Stand By Me, The Lost Boys, Gremlins, and Friday the 13th, has repeatedly stated that he was abused as a child within Hollywood. He has alleged that a network of powerful individuals exploited young actors, and that many of those people remained influential in the industry. Feldman has also consistently said that Michael Jackson was not one of his abusers. In interviews dating back to the 1990s, Feldman described going to law enforcement with information about people he claimed had harmed him and others. According to Feldman, investigators were more interested in asking him about Jackson than in pursuing the names he offered. Feldman has publicly expressed frustration that his attempts to highlight alleged systemic abuse were overshadowed by the intense focus on Jackson. He has maintained that, in his experience, Jackson did not act inappropriately toward him and that he felt safe in Jackson's presence during a chaotic period of his childhood. Feldman has described Jackson's environment as one where drugs, alcohol, and explicit behavior were discouraged, contrasting it with what he says he experienced elsewhere in Hollywood. He has framed Jackson as someone who understood the pressures of childhood fame and tried to create spaces where young performers could feel like ordinary kids. These statements have remained controversial, especially given the broader public debate about Jackson's relationships with children. Other former child stars have also spoken publicly about their experiences. Macaulay Culkin, who became internationally famous after Home Alone, has repeatedly stated in interviews that Jackson never behaved inappropriately toward him. Culkin acknowledged sleeping in Jackson's bedroom at Neverland Ranch, but explained that the room was expansive and that nothing sexual occurred. During Jackson's 2005 criminal trial, Culkin testified under oath that he had never been molested by Jackson. At the time, that testimony was widely seen as significant for the defense. Similarly, Wade Robson testified in Jackson's defense in 2005, stating that Jackson had not abused him. Years later, Robson reversed his position and accused Jackson in civil lawsuits and in the documentary Leaving Neverland. His change in testimony remains a point of debate among supporters and critics of Jackson, with some viewing it as evidence of prior silence and others questioning his motives. The conflicting accounts have contributed to the enduring complexity of Jackson's legacy. The first major allegations against Jackson emerged in 1993, when 13-year-old Jordan Chandler accused him of sexual abuse. The case led to an extensive investigation. Jackson denied the allegations. A civil lawsuit was settled for a substantial sum, but no criminal conviction resulted from that case. Supporters of Jackson argue that the settlement was a strategic legal decision made to avoid a prolonged trial that could further damage his career. Critics argue that settlements can complicate perceptions of innocence or guilt. Criminal charges were not ultimately pursued in that instance due in part to the alleged victim's unwillingness to testify. A decade later, Jackson faced another set of accusations, this time involving Gavin Arvizo. The case went to trial in 2005 in Santa Barbara, California. After months of testimony, including witness accounts from both the prosecution and defense, the jury deliberated and acquitted Jackson on all 14 counts. Jurors later stated publicly that they did not find the prosecution's evidence convincing beyond a reasonable doubt. The acquittal was legally decisive, though public opinion remained divided. During and after these legal battles, the media's portrayal of Jackson often emphasized eccentric aspects of his life. His unconventional lifestyle, Neverland Ranch, and friendships with children were repeatedly scrutinized. For some observers, the acquittals reinforced the principle that he was innocent under the law. For others, lingering doubts persisted regardless of courtroom outcomes. The tension between legal verdicts and public perception has remained central to discussions about Jackson. The release of Epstein-related documents reignited that tension. According to reporting about the documents, Jackson's name appeared in connection with a visit to Epstein's Palm Beach property in 2000. Journalist accounts from that period indicated that Jackson was seeking financial advice during disputes involving his music catalog. There has been no public evidence that Jackson was accused of misconduct related to Epstein. In a deposition by Epstein associate Joanna Sjoberg, she reportedly denied any sexual contact between herself and Jackson. Nonetheless, the mere presence of Jackson's name in court materials fueled speculation online. It is important to understand that Epstein's records included numerous contacts, acquaintances, and visitors, not all of whom were accused of crimes. The public release of names has often led to assumptions that exceed what the documents actually establish. Legal experts have cautioned that inclusion in a contact list or mention in testimony does not automatically imply participation in wrongdoing. The broader context also includes the FBI's monitoring of Jackson over the years. Federal files, some of which have been released, show that the Bureau received tips and threats related to Jackson and assessed allegations. Publicly available records indicate that no federal charges were brought against him as a result of those reviews. Supporters cite this as evidence that authorities did not find substantiating proof of criminal conduct. Critics counter that absence of charges does not necessarily equate to full exoneration in the court of public opinion. Feldman's claims about systemic abuse in Hollywood have also gained renewed attention in light of broader industry reckonings. Over the past decade, movements exposing misconduct in entertainment and other sectors have led to convictions and accountability for some powerful figures. Feldman has argued that his experiences were part of a larger pattern that was ignored or minimized for years. His advocacy has been both praised and questioned, but it has undeniably kept the conversation about child safety in Hollywood alive. Michael Jackson died in 2009. Since then, debates about his life and legacy have continued in documentaries, books, court filings, and online forums. Some emphasize his philanthropy, humanitarian visits to hospitals and orphanages, and record-breaking musical achievements. Others focus on the accusations and the troubling aspects of his relationships with children. Both narratives coexist, often clashing intensely. The principle of innocent until proven guilty is frequently invoked in discussions about Jackson. Legally, he was acquitted in 2005 and never convicted of child molestation. That is a matter of public record. At the same time, civil suits and documentaries have introduced allegations that were never tested in criminal court after his death. This leaves the historical record complicated and, for many, unresolved. The resurfacing of Jackson's name in Epstein-related materials illustrates how quickly reputations can be affected by association. It also demonstrates the speed at which digital platforms amplify partial information. While some interpret the renewed scrutiny as evidence of hidden truths, others see it as another instance of sensational headlines overshadowing verified facts. Ultimately, the debate over Michael Jackson reflects larger questions about celebrity, power, justice, and media responsibility. It highlights how legal outcomes, personal testimonies, and public narratives can diverge sharply. Whether one views Jackson primarily as a groundbreaking artist, a wrongly accused figure, a deeply flawed individual, or something in between often depends on which evidence and testimonies they find most credible. As discussions continue, careful examination of documented facts, court records, and sworn testimony remains essential. High-profile cases invite strong emotions, but lasting understanding depends on distinguishing verified information from speculation. The conversation surrounding Michael Jackson, Epstein, and Hollywood's history of abuse allegations is unlikely to fade soon, and it will likely continue to evolve as new documents and perspectives emerge.